Many of you have been marvelling over the play of Daniil Dubov and that splendid game against Sergei Karyakin. And what I'd like to do is show you another win by Dubov, also from the Russian Superfinal, where he defeated the eventual winner of the tournament, Jan Nepomniachtchi. If the game against Karyakin could have been played in a Vienna coffee house in 1913, well, this game is a little bit more up to date, at least the opening is, but it features a brutal attack against Nepo's castled king. So I'll tell you about that in a second, but stick around till the end of the video because I've got some news about some new PowerPlay merch. So here we go. Here's the game, Dubov against Nepomniachtchi. So Dubov, 24 years old. He is a little bit inconsistent. Nevertheless, he did make a good score in this Russian Superfinal. He scored +2, 6.5 out of 11, whereas Nepo won it with 7.5. But it was such a fascinating tournament, actually. A really high percentage of decisive games and, well, some amazing games, actually. This one included. So Nepo plays the Grunfeld. He is, he often plays the Grunfeld. It suits his sharp style. And here, bishop c4 is, you could say, the old main line. There's bishop e3, knight f3. But Dubov plays this tricky bishop check, and that is so typical of his style. He doesn't like to play main lines. He likes to try and just outwit his opponent by doing something a little bit unusual in the opening. Bishop b5 check. Well, if the bishop blocks, then White's bishop drops back to e2 and then knight f3, and, well, the argument is that the bishop isn't so well placed on d7. But c6 is normal, and Nepo has played in exactly this way before. We saw Radjabov against Jeffrey Song from Khanty-Mansiysk 2019, went castles here. I think I showed this game, actually, and, well, Radjabov succeeded in getting a very strong attack against Xiong's castled king with the good old f-pawn. But Nepo instead played b5. And the most popular move here is b4, which leads to very complicated positions. And I have to say, certainly not played out. There's a lot of very interesting ideas that are really yet to be explored. And I'm sure Dubov would have had something up his sleeve. a5, chasing that bishop. And, well, advancing these queenside pawns, which, supported by this bishop, can be quite potent later on, actually, using this majority. But it's interesting that Black, for the moment, isn't developing the queenside pieces. Knight f3, castles, castles. And here, well, Nakamura against So, early in the year went c5, but Naka was ready for that and defeated So. But Nepo played a4, as he's done previously, actually, booting the bishop off this diagonal. So we have an unbalanced situation where Black is advancing these queenside pawns and White has claimed the centre. Who's going to come off better? Rook b1, that's an important move. Stepping away from the bishop on the long diagonal, but also preventing this pawn from advancing and putting a little bit of pressure on the pawn on b5. And previously we've seen bishop a6 played to defend that pawn, but Nepo played knight c6, attacking the d-pawn as he's played before. And here, again, Nakamura against Nepomniachtchi from Paris 2019 went bishop e3, and, well, Nepo had good pressure on the centre and, well, let me just show you the position they reached. Typical of Nepo, he's a dynamic player. He likes to, he's not afraid to sacrifice, let's put it like that. And here he had rook and knight against the queen, but you can see his dark square control. Well, black has excellent compensation here. Clearly, Dubov had come to this game ready for this position. He knew Nepo had played like this before, and his improvement was pawn to d5. So keeping that strong centre. And, well, it's so often we see the pawn advancing to d5 in the Grunfeld. And, well, let's see what happens. So the knight attacked. And this is actually the computer suggestion, but well, it's a very natural Grunfeld move. So knight e5. Knight takes, bishop takes. And here, you know, white has a bit of a choice. You could play rook takes b5, but then bishop a6. And there's a skewer. Bishop d2 defends that pawn. That's possible. But then black would strike back with f5, undermining the pawn on d5. Dubov played much more actively. He was ready for this. Bishop h6, hitting the rook. And this is an interesting moment because, as I said, Nepo's not afraid to sacrifice, and here he ditched the exchange. Okay, let's look at the alternatives. Blocking with the bishop or playing rook e8. If you block with the bishop, then the king is a little bit weaker. It's certainly nice for white that dark squared bishop has gone. And after this, putting pressure here, c4, the bishop nudges back. That's backward pawn is a weakness. The majority has been crippled, and we've got perhaps a queen coming to d4. The centre looks very strong. White is better. So that's no good. What about rook e8? Well, here white can go straight onto the attack. I like queen e1, which makes it possible perhaps to switch to the king side. And now a little pawn sacrifice. Here and now you can see white has this lovely spearhead blocking out that bishop. And could be we simply advance that h-pawn to h5 and have a go at g6. I think we can just say that white has pretty good compensation for the pawn. So I can understand why Nepo didn't want to fall into a position where he'd be a little bit passive. So he decided to ditch the exchange. And that's a kind of classic Grunfeld idea that this dark squared bishop is so powerful on that long diagonal that he'd prefer to give up the exchange. And in combination with that majority, it could be dangerous. Now, if you try to hang on to that pawn, let's say queen e1, then queen a5, and there's more pressure there. So, well, Dubov didn't want to hang around. He just ditched that pawn and played rook f3, taking the rook away from that diagonal and attacking the bishop. And here, well, Nepo played the queen to a5. That is a risky move. He could have just checked and perhaps just brought the king here. I think it's a really double-edged situation. White has attacking chances. That's a superb bishop. I beg your pardon. All we can say is black has compensation for the exchange, but white has chances as well here. But queen a5, well, that puts the queen in Siberia, basically. That's, for once, the phrase is fitting for the Russian Championship, but it really is in Siberia. It's such a long way from the king, and I think Nepo's natural instincts failed him here. e5. Why not? Opening up the diagonal for the bishop and supporting the d pawn. So that is a beautiful pawn duo. King g7 is the best move here. Nepo played king g8. Again, I think that's another error of judgment because, Well, king h1, that's a careful little move, just stepping away out of any potential checks here. Rook d8, and now Dubov went for it. e6. And the reason I say that I think king g8 is an error of judgment is that here you can see g6 has less protection. And Dubov seized on that straight away by playing bishop takes pawn. And this is such a straightforward attack, actually. You know, when you consider that white is about to bring the queen and the rook into the attack against the king, which really doesn't have many defenders. The bishop is a defender along this diagonal, but that's about it. The queen is just way out of play, not to mention the bishop as well. Pawn takes bishop, and now queen c2. So white wins a tempo by attacking the bishop, but also attacks the pawn on g6. And black, of course, has no check here. The king has stepped to the side. Bishop g7. Queen takes g6 is good. Rook g3 is even better. And let me see. Pawn takes pawn. Queen takes g6 is crushing already. That's the basic idea, and the queen can't step here because the rook controls that square. So after rook g3, g5 was played, which is a bit desperate. Basically, if rook takes g5, then rook d5. And, well, the rook has to move again, so black is gaining a tempo there. But after g5, queen g6 is really powerful. Just bringing the queen in, and now rook takes g5 is a threat. And black simply doesn't have a defense here. If rook takes queen e6, well, it's check, and then we take the rook. So after queen g6, that's just played queen d2 from Dubov, and now rook takes g5. Threatening mate. Queen c3 defends, but now the queen is in. Queen takes e6 check. If the king goes here, then there's rook h5. So king f8. Now, how do we continue? Can't play rook check because the bishop will block. But rook e1, let's get that rook into the game. And that really is powerful. Threatening, queen takes pawn check. If rook e8, we've got d6. If queen f6, we've got rook f5. And if bishop f6, we've got rook g8 mate. So that spells trouble for black. And the only way out is a bit desperate. Nepo had to give up his queen. Now, he's got two bishops for the queen, and there is a little bit of potential to push the queenside pawns. Nevertheless, this should be winning. But I really like the way that Dubov tackled this final phase. He doesn't mess around at all. He didn't bother moving the rook. He just played queen h4, just straight in. If that's taken, then the queen checks and takes the rook on d8. That's game over. So rook d6 played by Nepo. Queen h7, threatening mate on g8. And if bishop takes, then that pawn is just going to roll down the board. It's interesting. This bishop is just way out of play. You know, if there had been a chance to get to this diagonal, but no, not here. So queen h7 just played, king e8. The king trying to run round the other side, but no. Queen g8 and queen a8. Excellent move. With the idea of rook g8, and the attack continues. And in the meantime, this queen is looking nasty as well. Queen a7 coming. So the rook is eliminated, but that is a strong passed pawn on g5. And now it's just a case of mopping up. Threat to take this pawn with queen a7 check. So c4 played. h4, that's an important move. let's just give the king an escape square, and useful to connect with the g-pawn as well. If c3, then we can check, and queen c5. That mops things up. And the game finished. b4, check. Queen b8, thank you very much. b-pawn is in the bag. And here Nepo decided enough was enough. That queen is just rampant. Can control this one. And then it's a case of, well, forcing those home, or even after queen b4, even a4 is going to force the win of material. And of course, white's king completely safe. So a brutal attack from Daniel Dubov. But as I said, I think Nepo misjudged that one with his move queen a5. That really doesn't look right. Nevertheless, Nepo did win the championship. Perhaps I'll show you a game of his, because he played some beautiful games in the tournament as well. So there we go. Dubov showing how strong he is. And, well, you know, I've been a big fan of his games for a long time. As you can see on the channel, he played some beautiful games last year in 2019. So, I will organise a poll for you to vote on your game of the year, by the way. I'm still gathering all the information in, but I will make a selection. But now, merch. We have had a couple of designs especially done for the channel, and you can find them on teespring.com. You'll find all the links down there to the PowerPlayChess channel, PowerPlayChess shop on teespring.com. And we have an Octopus Knight logo. You can see it there, and you can get that on mugs, t-shirts, hoodies. You check it out in the shop of all shapes, sizes and colours. And we've also had a design for split rooks as well. Check that out. Again, you can have that on mugs, t-shirts, hoodies. Do check out the shop. So there you go. Treat yourself to a present this Christmas. Treat your friends to a present as well. I think that's about it. Thanks for watching.